Dr. Tremblay, how would you describe the childhood obesity issue in Canada as we currently stand?
Well, maybe more appropriately as we currently sit. The childhood obesity epidemic is a serious problem. Just on Monday here in Ontario, the report from the Healthy Kids panel was given or received by the provincial government here in Ontario with 23 recommendations related to reducing childhood obesity to meet the provincial target, which here in Ontario they set as a 20% reduction within the next 5 years. So certainly in terms of political attention provincially and federally, it's reached what appears to be a tipping point. The levels are the highest we've ever recorded. Depending on what threshold you're using, somewhere between a quarter and a third of Canadian children and youth are overweight or obese.
So why is the message not getting through, or is it not getting through to the masses?
Because it's hard. Why are we sitting and not standing right now? It's as simple as that in some respects. It's as complicated as that in terms of how we change a social norm to one that has become very accustomed and very adapted to omnipresent, high caloric, good tasting, affordable food, and a world which encourages us to sit and not move. And in so doing, entertains us, and so children and adults alike. And so that's the world we've created. We've built roads and displaced parks. We've gotten rid of front yards and built, more places for vehicles. We sit in vehicles. We don't run beside them, very much. And so that's the world in which we live. And so it's incredibly complicated and difficult to say, okay, oops, we made a mistake. And consequently, our kids and ourselves are becoming progressively overweight and obese, and all of the consequences that go along with that. How do we fix this up? And that's where therein lies the challenge.
So, as a medical professional and as a person who has been on the forefront of this issue for many years now, when do you think this conversation needs to start when it concerns parents?
Well, I think the conversation has started, and for years we've been talking about this issue. People like you have been covering this issue. It just seems to get worse and worse, and it's almost being able to make inroads is just incredibly difficult on this issue. It relates to parents, but it doesn't singularly relate to parents. It relates to teachers. It relates to communities. It relates to government policies. It relates to us as researchers and healthcare practitioners and so on. And so I think we need to be careful about finger pointing and saying, when are parents going to wake up and smell the roses and deal with this issue? But clearly, they have identified, kids have identified, other research has identified that they are a key stakeholder. They're a key decision maker, and the dominant one in the early years, certainly, and until kids have some autonomy where their peers become more important as well. And so they themselves say, listen, we know we're part of the problem, but we're part of the problem only. These other segments need to change as well. So I think there's a recognition there. There's some very good information in the new Healthy Kids panel report that just came out, quotes from parents, focus group meetings that they had with them where the parents said, listen, I get it. I know that, my kids should eat healthy, move healthy, sleep healthy. It's so hard in the world in which we live, or in the income bracket that I survive in, or in my personal circumstance, or because we live on the 27th floor of a high-rise, there is no park, there is no safe place for my kids to go. And, so there are a variety of very legitimate challenges out there that different people face. Having said that, this is the future generation of our country. This is our lineage at stake. So it's worth a pretty darn good effort to try and overcome whatever those barriers are.
So if we're going to deal with the parent aspect of this question just for a minute, and I appreciate you saying it's such a multi-pronged in terms of the different groups that are involved in it, but if for parents, what advice tips, practical advice can you offer to parents to help them deal with this crisis in their own families?
Yeah, so I think I would say don't get overwhelmed with the complexity of the issue, which might sound a little bit contradictory to what I just said. But every little bit counts in terms of moving towards healthy eating behaviors, moving towards healthy moving behaviors, and so there's lots we can do. And I think often we, the people like me that are in leadership and advocacy positions that are telling people what they should do, I think we've unfortunately sort of trained people to think that any intervention needs to be sort of mammoth in nature, needs to cost money, needs to require uniforms, needs to necessitate travel, and all of this stuff, this sort of burden of just moving. And it doesn't. Healthy eating, healthy moving does not have to be an expensive enterprise. It doesn't have to be a big transformation. It does in terms of our thinking, but not in our behavior. So, for example, whoever's listening to this, you don't have to think that I'm being a bad parent or I'm not addressing this if I don't sign my kid up for fill in the blank sport or fill in the blank lesson or whatever. Those are important. I think they have a role to play. I don't think they're the answer to our prayers. I don't think building more arenas and more bike paths and more wave pools at facilities that you need to drive 25 kilometers to go to and pay a fee to get in, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is making sure that the front and backyard and the driveway are heavily used. And I don't mean by the vehicle. I mean by chalk, by balls, by skipping ropes, by those sorts of things. These things are virtually free. So anyways, decomplexitize, this whole issue. Get outside and play. I mean, if there's the simplest thing, and people just don't buy into it. But if you remove yourself from your house, if you and I right now were outside talking, I'll bet you we wouldn't be sitting, we'd be walking. I'm sure that I wouldn't have my mug beside me, or you might have your snack beside you. We wouldn't have that outside. And so good things happen when you get into the outdoors. You breathe fresh air, you get exposure to sunlight, movement breaks out naturally, creativity emerges, incidental eating stops. No cost to anyone, anywhere, anytime, except maybe a little bit of time between family and, between parents and children, which is what we all complain we don't have enough of. Let's make time for it. It's free. It's right there. We don't have to go anywhere. 4 kids, and I'm often asked, are your kids active and so on, which I suppose even if they weren't, I would have to answer that they are. But I do believe they are. And I don't believe it's because of our socioeconomic status. My wife and I are active. We're good role models. Through our lives, we do marathons and triathlons and so on, but you don't have to do that. And we're involved in different sort of sports. But more than important than that, we're at the park every night when in the summertime with the kids. We run outside with the dog all year round, both of us. And the kids have seen that. They've grown up in baby joggers and so on. And none of them have iPhones. None of them have these tablet gadgets and so on that even people that are in a financial position that it might be a struggle to get that, find the resources to pay for that, but can't find the resources to buy a bike or a hockey net for the driveway and so on. And I think I see the social pressure for that. We don't succumb to it. Others don't. Most do. And then kids spend their time flicking their fingers and thumbs, sitting in front of a virtual world when the real world is right there. It's free, it's fantastic, you meet people in it, you connect with nature in it, you breathe fresh air when you're in it, and so somehow we've lost that. We've managed to let animation and a fake world on a little wee tiny screen on our lap replace, and I was just an anecdote, I had my youngest daughter with me in Australia at a congress recently, and so we're doing the harbour tour in front of the Opera House, the Sydney Opera House, one of the greatest landmarks on the planet. And we were there, I don't know, maybe 50 people on the ferry or whatever it is. And as near as I can tell, 2 of us were looking at the Opera House. The rest were filming it through their iPad pod thing, and even experiencing that virtually. Like they're capturing it so they can go back and watch it artificially when they're right there experiencing it. And this is the world we live in, and it's just we've just lost the forest for the trees. And so anyways, our kids have grown up experiencing that, where television is a default thing you do at the end of the day. Maybe watch one episode of Big Bang Theory and you go to bed. It's not just what you do. No, everything else, living life, is what you do.